I've learned that we sometimes analyze situations in the wrong way, which make us have negative feelings afterwards. So what I always say is that it's not a situation that gives you a certain emotion. It's the way you analyze it, and therefore the thoughts you have about it that make you feel a certain way. So I think it's quite fascinating how quick it is to sometimes make assumptions, how quick it is to sometimes analyze stuff, and then immediately interact with our emotions.
Welcome back to another episode of Your Visionary Podcast.
Your Visionary Podcast.
Your Visionary Podcast. Your Visionary Podcast.
Visionary Podcast.
Welcome to Your Visionary Podcast. This podcast is specifically for you and your vision. Get ready to grow. Let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Your Visionary Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Brown, and I want to thank you for tuning in for today's podcast. And we have another special episode for you today. We're in this third season of Your Visionary Podcast, all about finding peace through mental health. And so I've been bringing on different psychologists from all over the world to share their insight and share their expertise when it comes to mental health. And so today we have another licensed psychologist with me today, and she's reporting live from Paris, France. So it'll be very interesting to hear from her and her experience. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome her to the podcast. Yasmina, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing?
Good. How about you?
Awesome. I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk to you and for the audience to hear from you. Let's just start, by telling the audience who you are, where you're from, and then how you got to be to where you are today.
Right. So I'm a clinical psychologist. I've studied in the UK and then moved to Paris. I'm CBD certified, and I currently work in a hospital part-time for addictions, and part-time I take my own clients online.
Awesome. So what was your journey like, right? Like what were the steps that led you to get to this point today?
I think I've always liked the human mind. I've always liked how life experiences and how your own personality can affect your choices, can affect your thoughts, can affect your emotions, how we're all different in the way we perceive situations and the way we feel certain things in the same situation. So I was always quite interested in the human brain and in psychology, and I decided to pursue it from a young age.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so through your time, in this profession, and I know everybody is different, right? But kind of from a overview perspective, like what have you learned about the human mind?
I've learned it can do wonders.
Yeah.
I think what I've learned is that your thoughts affect your emotions. I've learned that we sometimes analyze situations in the wrong way, which make us have negative feelings afterwards. So what I always say is that it's not a situation that gives you a certain emotion. It's the way you analyze it, and therefore the thoughts you have about it that make you feel a certain way. So I think it's quite fascinating how quick it is to sometimes make assumptions, how quick it is to sometimes analyze stuff, and then immediately interact with our emotions. How we can bring things from our memory, how we can associate things from our lives, from our past. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. And what does it look like to kind of shift your mindset? Because for me, I'm such an advocate of like the power of positive thinking. But right. I know that, there are people out there, and probably a lot of people who think negatively, right? And it's kind of like that thing, one of those things where if you're thinking negatively for so long, you kind of just build up this habit of just automatically, associating something negatively. But like, what does it look like to kind of change that, right, and start to think more positively?
What do you mean? How does it affect your life, or how do we do it?
No, how do you do it? Like, how do you shift your mindset from thinking negative to thinking positive? And I know it's a process, right? But what would that process be like for you?
Well, what I always say is that the brain is a muscle. So just like you learn how to cycle or how to walk or how to do a certain new activity or how to learn a language, well, you learn, you train your brain to shift its way of analyzing situations, of thinking more positively, of not going immediately into a distorted way of thinking or a negative way of thinking. So it's a process. It's, as you said, it's not straightforward. It's ups and downs. It's a lot of work. Usually it's with professional help to be able to change habits in the ways we think, in the way we act. But I like to call it like a training. It's like like a muscle.
Yeah, that's so cool. So so now you work in a hospital for addictions, which is very
Correct.
cool. So I want to dive into that, and kind of talk about addictions. So I guess the first question is, what are signs of addictions?
So I think for me, it's not about how many drinks you have a week or how many drinks you have in a year or in a month. For me, it's the importance, the value you give to a drink or to a drug or to a behavior. I was talking about drinks because most of my patients suffer from alcohol addictions, but I'd say it's the importance you give to this behavior or to this drug. It's if you make your life around it, if you wake up in the morning thinking which time in your day are you gonna be able to have this drug, if you cannot go a certain amount of time without having it, if you have it in front of you and cannot stop yourself from consuming it, or if you cannot stop yourself once you've started consuming it. So there are different aspects of addictions. Some people can go a long period of time without calling someone to order a certain drug or go out and buy a drink, but the moment that you actually put that drink in front of them, they're not going to be able to stop. So that's some way of addiction, for example. Other people cannot go on a day or a week without having a certain drug, so then they'll go base their week, their life around it. So I think, it's what's the big importance that you give to this drug in your life?
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool. The value of it, and it's funny. It makes me think of a friend of mine, one of my close friends now. I think they may be struggling with it because in my city of Atlanta, like Percocet pills are a big thing now. I think it's a form of opioids, but it's a huge thing now. And I have one friend who like just suffered from a heartbreak like 6 months ago, and now like every day she has to take one of those pills. Sometimes she wants to stop, but and it's funny, we just talked about it. She said that whenever she does the drug, it makes her numb to the pain and she doesn't feel it anymore. And it's like whenever she doesn't take it, she just feels sad, right? And she doesn't like that. She doesn't like feeling sad, so she just does what she has to do to not feel it.
Right. It's a very common description we usually get from people who suffer from addictions. They'll tell you when you ask them, why do you actually drink, or why do you actually smoke, or why do you actually do X drug or X thing? And they'll tell you it's because I need to forget. They use it as a form of anesthesia, like they wanted to forget what they're feeling or what they're thinking. So yeah, it's quite a common pattern actually.
Sorry to interrupt this podcast. I hope you're enjoying it so far. I want to take a quick moment to tell you about our presenting sponsor, Blemish. Blemish is a tech startup founded in Atlanta and being built in Paris. The one goal of Blemish is to build imperfect people for a better tomorrow. To learn more about how Blemish accomplishes this goal, visit blemish.com. That's BLIMISH.com. If you enjoy hearing from psychologists and learning about the science of the mind, visit blemish.com. If you're ready to start your own mental health journey, or you want to get more information about how to do it, visit blemish.com. If you value personal growth and obtaining information to help you reach your higher self, support our presenting sponsor and visit blemish.com. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So why isn't that healthy? Because on the surface, it sounds good, right? Like, okay, it stops you from being sad, so just do it. But why is it not healthy?
Great. Well, I'm going to take the example, for example, of alcohol, just to make it more concrete. So when you actually consume alcohol, the first few drinks, the person is actually going to feel better. They're going to feel happy. They're going to feel light. They're going to feel more confident. They're going to tackle the objective that they're looking for. After a certain amount of use of alcohol, it's going to affect and play with chemicals in your brain. So you will not have the stability that you usually have. You will not have the norm that you usually have. And therefore it will kind of, I would say it's kind of a depressant to the brain. So what you're actually gonna be having is more negative thoughts, more strong negative emotions. So whatever you were feeling in the first place is actually gonna come up at the surface, and it's gonna be intensive and much more intense and much more negative, as we say. It's gonna make you take risky behaviors. It's gonna make you engage in situations and acts that you would regret later. It's going to affect your health on the long term, because any product that is consumed excessively will have impact on your physical health. So at first it's a happy pill. We take it and we think it's gonna be a quick fix, but actually on the long term it's more of a deterioration.
Wow, that's crazy. It makes me think about the difference between instant gratification and like the long term satisfaction, right?
Right.
Like instantly it might feel good, but in the long term it's harmful and it hurts you. It sounds like. Wow. So when it comes to treating addiction, what is the process that you have seen works, in your profession?
I think you don't have like one thing that works for everyone. I think every person is different, but I think there are certain steps that you should take. First one is trying to understand first if this person is aware that what they have is an addiction. If they understand that addiction is actually a disease, just like having diabetes, just like having migraines. It's something that is chronic. It's something that will be with them for a long time, that they will have to learn with it. It takes a long time for people to actually accept and understand that it is not their fault, that it is actually disease of the brain, addiction. This is what it is. So that's the first step, I'd say. The second is trying to understand what are the behaviors, what are the triggers in their lives that push them to have this drink or have this drug. What are the emotions? So trying to understand the causes behind it, not the causes as in why am I drinking, but I mean, what led me to have an addiction, but more what makes me drink today, for example. So trying to figure out as I call them, situations that put you at risk. So I think that's the second step. And then what we look at is how can we avoid those situations? How can we work with them? How can we deal with them if we cannot avoid them? It's a long process. It's a process of acceptance. It's a process of bargaining. It's a process of change, of letting go of certain people in your life, of letting go of certain behaviors, of certain toxic environments, of learning how to work on emotions that trigger you to actually crave the drug. So if you actually consume a drug because it helps you deal with stress, then we'll work on stress management. If you actually consume a drug because you have low self-esteem, then we'll work on that instead. So we're actually going to go and try to find a different alternative to what you're actually trying to, I'm going to say, use this drug for as a solution.
Yeah. Wow, I like that. And it seems like, a pretty concrete three-step process, right? And I'll just repeat it for the audience. So the right. The first step is understanding, that a person is addicted, and understanding, what that means, right? And then the second step is identifying the what you said, at-risk situations. So the question, why am I doing this today? What is triggering me today to do it?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And then the third step is, how can you avoid the at-risk situations?
Exactly.
That's it. Did I get it right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then we'll work on the triggers, and then we'll work on what's actually making you feel bad today. So
Yeah,
as
I
I
love
said,
that.
it can be stress, it can be self-esteem, it can be self-affirmation, it can be family issues.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think that brings me, to the next question, which is, but before we started recording, we were just chatting, and you said that, people who struggle with addiction aren't really struggling with addiction. So, what did you mean by that? Let's dive into that.
What I meant is that they're not only dealing with addiction. So what I meant is that there's something deeper that is bothering them. For example, people can be suffering from general anxiety. People can be suffering from bad stress management. People can be suffering from low self-esteem. People can be suffering from family problems. People can be suffering from toxic relationship in their life. People can be suffering from burnout. People can be suffering from PTSD, from dealing with a traumatic event. So, what I meant is that, yeah, I mean, even people can be suffering with bipolar disorder. People can be suffering from borderline disorder. So, what I meant is that you can have addiction and have something else on the side. And it's important not to only work on treating addiction, but to work as well on what might be aggravating your addiction, what might be pushing you more and deeper into your addiction.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And so, if someone feels like they have one of those things that you just named, um, what is like an everyday activity that you can do to build up that muscle, right? Because we mentioned how the brain is a muscle, and so it requires training in order to be
Right.
strong, if you will. So what's just like a one generic everyday activity that someone can do if they want to strengthen their brain?
I'd say an important point is working on your thoughts. What I usually tell my patients is that what actually makes you feel this way is not the situation, it's your thought about it. So when you have a situation, you have a thought, and then your thought will trigger an emotion, and sometimes it's very quick. What I actually try to do is take that thought that you have that's making you sad, that's making you angry, that's making you anxious, that's making you scared, and try to criticize it. Try to replace it with a different thought, a thought that is more objective. Now, people will tell me, how do I do that, right? I'll tell them, imagine that it's the person that you love the most in the world that is having this scary thought, this anxious thought, this sad thought. What would you actually say to them to make their thought feel more neutral, to make them to make them look at the situation more objectively and not be trapped into a very intense negative emotion? That's the way. Another way is to think about your thought and try to say, am I sure 100% about this? Do I have proof about this? Have I been in a situation before where I thought this way, but it wasn't true? Does everyone else think about the situation the same way as I do? So it's actually going and challenging your thought. It's criticizing it in order to actually come to a conclusion where you'd say, okay, that's my fear, but that might not be 100% true. And just going from 100% true to 70% true will make you start to doubt that thought, and will make you start to have, I'd say, less intense negative emotions, and the possibility of something more neutral or more positive can actually take place because you've actually made space for it. So, yeah.
Wow, that's very, very valuable. Challenge your thoughts. And to me, it makes you think of a few things. One, it makes you think of, like the whole idea of consciousness, right? Like not being the person that is having the thoughts, but being the person that is like looking down at the thoughts, right? And
Right.
I heard this analogy used once. I forgot who said it, but they said like think of your thoughts. No, think of every thought as if it has to like come to a roadblock, right, or like a stop sign. You can either go left with the thought, or you can go right with the thought. Right, left may be positive, right may be negative.
Right.
But make every thought kind of stop at that roadblock, and then you decide, which way you want to go with it, and what you decide will affect, how you act.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. I love that. And so, so say someone, someone is at the point where they are feeling like it's time to start this whole mental health journey, which I hope is the result of these episodes. What advice would you give someone who is starting their mental health journey?
I'd say what's what I always tell my patients, and the most important thing is if you're actually seeing a therapist or if you're part of a therapeutic community, it's important to be honest with them and yourself. Very quite often we try to want to play the role of someone who got it all together, of you don't want to fail in front of people that are trying to help you. You want them to feel proud, or you want to feel proud about yourself. And so sometimes you are trying to hide some setbacks or some negative thoughts or some negative behaviors that you've engaged in. And what I'd say is the more honest you are with them and yourself, the more this is going to work and this is going to move forward. And the sooner you realize that this is for your own benefit. So yeah, I'd say honesty.
Honesty. Wow. That's so cool. Okay. Yeah, I love that. And so it's let the audience know how they can get in contact with you or find information about you, if they have more questions or they want to maybe even, be a client or see what that process looks like, where should they go?
Right. So my name is Yasmina Frem. I don't know if that will be showing on the screen, but so they can find me on LinkedIn. They can send me an email. My email is fremyasmina@gmail.com, and we can have a talk and we can have a chat.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and I hope they do that, because one thing I stress is like the importance of reaching out to people and like talking with people, right? Because I really believe that everything that you get in life not everything, but most things you get in life will come from another person. And so it's important to not fear and not be scared of people, right? Because even like this conversation is started just from a LinkedIn message.
Exactly.
We didn't even know each other, but it just started from that. And so just reaching out and taking the first step of just asking a question can go a long way.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Your Visionary Podcast. Hope to see you all in the next one. Thank you so much, Yasmina.
Thank you.
And now this part of the episode is called the Visionary Minute, where I go over 3 key takeaways from the previous episode. And when this episode with Yasmina, the first key takeaway is that she said your thoughts affect your emotions. Your thoughts affect your emotions. In the first 5 or so minutes of this conversation, we talked a lot about emotions and how important they are to your actions and your thoughts. And so that was one of the main key takeaways for me. And the second one is that she said that your mind is a muscle that needs to be worked and trained. And I think that's so crucial. And it's just another reminder that your mindset is important, and it takes time and intentionality to really grow your mindset. And the third takeaway is that when you're dealing with an addiction, the problem is not the amount of times you do it. The problem is the importance or the value that you place on the activity. And I think that's so important because it's a perspective shift, right? And I think it allows you to really question something that you may be struggling with stopping. It's not how many times you do it; it's the value or the importance that you place on it. So if you're dealing with something, you're struggling with something that may be an addiction, do that. Think about the importance or the value that you're attaching to whatever it is, and I hope that helps for you, and that helps you kind of realize the state that you're in, and I hope it helps you to grow and get better and get closer to the vision that you have for your life. And so thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Your Visionary Podcast. I'll see you on the next one. Peace and love.